Has you ever gotten that feeling listening to an album where it's like, whoa, it's peeling back these layers of something kind of bigger, something almost unsettling?
Yeah.
That's the vibe I got from Milk Toast and Dark Matters
Mm.
by Franklin County Coding Company.
Interesting title.
10 tracks, it's under 40 minutes. But man, it just drills down into this feeling of things falling apart.
Yeah.
Entropy at work.
I see.
And that's what we're doing right now, a deep dive for you on this.
What grabbed me right off the bat was the title itself, Milk Toast and Dark Matters. It sets up this incredible tension, right? I mean, you have this familiar, almost childlike comfort food image juxtaposed against this cosmic immensity, this force shaping the universe.
Right.
Kind of a brilliant jumping off point to explore decay, wouldn't you say?
It really is. And let's break down the title a little bit more. Milk Toast. Yeah. Turns out it's more than just soggy bread.
Oh.
Yeah. It actually has this really interesting history. Back in the 19th century, it was considered this very bland, very easily digestible food that was often given to people who were sick or upset.
Okay.
So it really was this symbol of comfort, almost to the point of being weak.
Mm.
And that connects directly to milk haste, which most of us know is a term for someone who's just utterly timid and spineless.
I see. So even within this image of comfort, there's this sense of fragility.
Absolutely.
All right, then you have Dark Matters, which, wow, that just launches us into this huge cosmic arena. I mean, in astrophysics, dark matters, it refers to those components that make up, 95% of the universe?
Yeah.
So you have dark matter, which is invisible, but it's essentially the scaffolding that holds galaxies together.
Yeah.
And then you have this even more mysterious force, dark energy, which is actually driving the universe's expansion, its acceleration.
That's right. Pulling it apart.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This album seems to be playing with this ratio, this idea that what we see and what feels comfortable, that milquetoast layer, it's just this tiny fraction, maybe like 5% of the story.
Oh, wow.
Well, the vast majority, that 95%, those dark matters, are this hidden process of disintegration. So what we're going to try to do is go through this album track by track and really unpack how it uses this central tension to explore this theme of decay, both in society and in ourselves.
Great. So with that framework in mind, how does the album actually start to sort of set the stage for this idea of things falling apart?
Well, the first track is called Milk Toast.
Okay.
And it kind of establishes that surface level right away, that innocuous surface. And it's actually a really interesting kind of a scathing critique of how country music itself has become so watered down, so bland.
Like a devolution of the genre?
Yeah, and at the center of it is this man in the truck character who is just completely stuck.
Yeah.
And he has this whiskey ache. So there's a hint of this deeper dissatisfaction, but it's all kind of numbed out by this generic drum machine sound. So you get the sense of Milky Toast, not just as timid, but almost as this cultural anesthesia, you know, this way of not really feeling or engaging with anything too deeply.
Yeah, I can see that. That's fascinating how that initial state of numbness can actually be a precursor to this kind of decay.
Right.
Because, I mean, if you're not really engaging with what's happening either around you or within you, then it can allow these problems to just fester and grow unnoticed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like ignoring a small leak in your roof. It may seem insignificant at first, but over time, man, that can cause serious damage.
Absolutely.
So how does the album sort of move from this feeling of being numb? How does it progress?
That takes us to track 2, The Bronze Rat.
Okay.
And in this one, the man in the truck, he somehow acquires this really strange statue in Murfreesboro. And it's described as ruby-eyed, almost like a Ganesha figure, you know, Ganesha.
Oh, yeah.
And it's referred to as this Vahana of chaos.
A Vahana of chaos, so like a vehicle.
Yeah, think of Vahana as like a vehicle, a carrier.
Okay.
In this case, carrying these disruptive forces.
I got it.
And this statue unleashes rats.
Oh, my.
That he then tries to drown in the big muddy river.
Wow.
And it almost feels like this desperate, maybe misguided attempt to get rid of that underlying unease that we saw in the first track, right? It's like he's taking this very physical action against this much more internal problem.
Yeah. It's a quixotic purge, as they call it, this grand gesture that's ultimately futile.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, this whole act of trying to drown the rats.
Right.
I mean, it's like he's confronting something unpleasant, you know, something that really scurries beneath the surface, and he's trying to put it underwater. Like it's a temporary suppression, you know?
Yeah.
And almost like you said, a foreshadowing of these dark matters that are about to become much more dominant.
Absolutely.
And then there's that line about the bronze knickers quip.
Yeah, yeah.
It's almost like this sudden burst of humor in this otherwise really dark context.
Yeah.
Like a way to kind of deflect that growing dread, right?
Yeah.
With something absurd.
Yeah, exactly. And then we move to track 3, HBIC, which stands for Head Boomer in Charge.
Okay.
And this is where the album introduces an antagonist, this boomer oligarch who's just living high on the hog on his 401k down in Cancun while this town where he made his money is really suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And he even takes a shot at millennials.
Oh, really? What does he say?
Calls their lives an adult playpen. So he's really not holding back. This character really feels like an embodiment of that dark matter.
Yeah.
You know, this unseen underlying economic exploitation that's slowly just eroding the foundations.
And, you know, if we connect this back to the numbness you talked about earlier, this HBIC figure, he really represents a system that thrives on that passivity, right?
Yeah.
When people aren't really paying attention or maybe they're feeling powerless, it just creates this environment where this kind of economic predation can flourish.
Absolutely.
Like a parasite just weakening its host from the inside out.
Right.
And that line, his ledger screams triumph.
Yeah.
It just highlights this cold, almost sociopathic indifference to the suffering he's causing.
Totally. And it brings us right to track 4, the only thing working in this town.
Okay.
And this is where those consequences of economic predation become very, very clear.
Oh, boy.
We see shuttered mines, this very, iconic image of the Rust Belt.
Right.
And then this very bleak statement that drugs are the only thing working in this community. The environment he's in is really desolate. Black tar veins, needles in glass, a rust-built necropolis.
Wow. So the album's really not pulling any punches here.
No, it gets pretty dark. And it's in this track that we start to see these links between the fat man from song 3 and this government Bill character who we'll encounter later in song 8.
Yeah.
They're somehow complicit in all this decline.
So this is where that dark matter's tangible mass becomes visible.
Yeah.
It's no longer just this kind of abstract force. It's manifested in this physical decay of the town.
Right.
The loss of jobs and this desperate turn to chemical gods to escape from that reality.
That's it. And speaking of government Bill, track 8 gives us a closer look at him.
Okay.
He's this working class boomer who's become part of this system, an apparatchik.
Yeah.
He's gone from flagging.
Yeah,
we're not sure exactly what that is, but presumably some sort of manual labor, maybe at the mines. But now he just rubber stamps budgets, secured a comfortable retirement, got his pensions, his pontoon boat.
Oh, yeah.
But he remains totally detached from the Main Street stead that we saw in Song 4. So he's an enabler of those forces, dark matter's bureaucratic sinew. This kind of person who allows the rot to just continue.
You know, the thing that's so unsettling about Government Bill is that he probably didn't start out wanting to be, some mustache-twirling villain.
Right.
He probably just wanted, security, a decent life.
Right.
But somewhere along the line, he became complicit in a system that was actually harming his own community.
Yeah.
I mean, it really makes you think about how easily people can become cogs in a destructive machine.
Absolutely. And then we get to track 5, the hum and the wires. And there's this real shift inward. That external decay and the reliance on drugs, it seems to recede, and this pervasive paranoia takes center stage.
Okay.
The narrator describes this hum that is real in my mind, so it's clearly in his head. It really feels like that despair from Song 4 has been internalized, transformed into this psychic fracture. And I think this is where that concept of dark energy as this accelerating force of disintegration really starts to feel palpable.
Yeah, it's as if those external forces have done their job, and now the breakdown is happening at this personal psychological level.
Right.
That static whisper he talks about, it echoes that earlier numbness from Song 1 and that taunting anxiety that we saw in Song 3. It's just this constant, unsettling undercurrent of unease. And that image of him, camped out by the lake with his gun, desperately trying to decode God's own mind, a mind that's clearly coming apart. It's just so powerful.
Very disturbing.
Yeah.
Track 6, An Acquired Taste, really narrows the focus to this personal ruin. It's about this prodigal son who's just completely immersed in what he calls pig slop. It's this self-inflicted abyss. And what's striking here is that there's this lack of external pressure.
Oh, so it's like a choice.
Yeah, it feels like it's that collapse that we saw in song 4
Yeah.
is now manifested in this very individual and almost willful descent.
Yeah, like dark matter's inertia, right? This
Yeah.
heavy force
Yeah.
that resists any attempt at redemption.
That's it. That's it. And the imagery of the rusted bike, it just perfectly captures that feeling of stagnation. Like it's not just being down on your luck,
Right.
but it's this being stuck, immobile, trapped in this state of decay.
Yeah.
Then with track 7, Bone to Pick, we zoom back out to this broader societal critique.
Yeah.
This one introduces Frank, who's in a coma, but he's being ruthlessly exploited as a breathing gold mine by all these people around him who just want to profit from his condition. And this feels like just this very, very concentrated version of that greed that we saw in songs 3 and 8, right?
Yeah.
It's allegory for a town being bled part by part, you know?
Yeah.
It's that dark matter's commodification of flesh,
Wow.
mirroring the rot, but on this intensely personal level.
And those hollow echoes, they just point to the fact that there's this moral vacuum at the heart of it all.
Right.
It's not just about the money, it's this stripping away of any sense of empathy, human decency in the pursuit of profit.
Yeah, very, very bleak. We already talked about government bill in track 8, and then we get to track 9, liquor license, which feels like the climax, you know?
Oh.
The man encounters this really disturbing scene, you know, this woman who's bound in a liquor store with these owners who from a third world country,
My God.
and they're being shielded by this slick young lawyer. It's this total breakdown of justice, right? Like the very structures meant to protect people have failed. It feels like the apogee of dark energy, this force just pushing back against any order.
And in this moment of chaos and injustice, the bronze rat returns.
Yes, yes.
With its ruby red glare, described as a Pied Piper purging dark secrets. So it's like this almost mythological intervention, right? Ganesha finally confronting this decay.
Yeah, and there's this almost fantastical karmic payoff.
Yeah.
The perpetrators being reborn as rats. So it's
Yeah.
like this cosmic justice deferred.
Yeah.
You know, the immediate situation isn't resolved in a satisfying way, but there's a hint that maybe there's this larger, more universal reckoning.
It's a powerful, if unsettling, way to think about consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the final track, Sour Grapes of Wrath, it just throws this really cynical curveball at us, almost inverts that initial numbness of song 1. Now we have these privileged kids who are like appropriating that pain and suffering that we saw in songs 4 and 5, dressing up in pawn shop suits, sneering at the Hicks, whose struggles they're essentially mocking, all while pocketing cash.
Wow.
And it links directly back to those who ultimately benefit, song 3 and song 8. It shows the rat intervention hasn't really changed the underlying dynamic.
So it's presented as this final act of dark matter, this bleak reality where even suffering gets commodified,
Right.
turned into this superficial trend, a form of entertainment for the privileged.
Right. Very disturbing conclusion. So when you look at the journey of the entire album, it really does feel like a descent. You start with that milquetoast facade,
Yeah.
this surface level of comfort and denial, and then it crumbles under the weight of all those dark matters.
Right.
And you can trace the man in the truck from that numbness to this comical resistance to witnessing collapse, you know, to culminating in that violent scene and then the cynical appropriation.
And even the rat's journey, it first appears as this potential agent of change, this Vahana of chaos, trying to disrupt that initial complacency, right?
Yeah.
Like it reappears in a moment of crisis, but ultimately even its intervention is overwhelmed by the relentless expansion of this dark energy.
It's almost as if those boomer characters, the ones we saw in songs 3 and 8,
Mm-hmm.
they represent the people who wield those unseen forces.
Right.
95%. Well, the underclass that we see in songs 4 through 7 are the ones who are fractured and consumed by it.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting how even the sound of the album itself kind of mirrors this decline.
Oh, how so?
It starts with this more traditional country sound, song 1, and then it evolves into this really unsettling hum.
Yeah.
That raw aggression of track 9, and then that almost sarcastic tone of the last track.
So it creates this really cohesive, unsettling, artistic statement where the music reinforces the themes.
Absolutely. For me, the big takeaway is that Milquetoast and Dark Matters isn't just an album. It's this really powerful and unsettling cosmology of decay.
Yeah.
It takes you from that comfortable,
Yeah.
almost willful ignorance and just plunges you into this disintegration
Absolutely.
on a societal level and within us.
It definitely leaves you pondering the hidden forces at play.
Absolutely. And if you want to experience this for yourself, you can find Milk Toast and Dark Matters streaming on Franklin County Coding Company's YouTube channel.
Yeah, check it out.
Give it a listen. See what you make of this journey.
And you, the listener, consider this. What are those 5% visible veneers in your own life? You know, those areas where things might seem comfortable, stable on the surface.
Right.
What 95% dark matters might be lurking beneath, shaping things in ways that you're not even fully aware of. What hum in the wires might you be experiencing? That's worth paying attention to. It's definitely something to think about.